This is my presentation on my service learning opportunity. My service learning was completed at Sunrise Senior Living. The mission at Sunrise is to provide the best quality of life for their senior residents. Due to restrictions from COVID-19 and its potentially fatal effects on the elderly population, much adaptation was needed from the organization in order to prevent depression, cognitive decline, or any feeling of isolation that can certainly occur when the residents are being quarantined to their rooms for a multitude of weeks to months. One of the solutions Sunrise provided was the ability for their residents to connect with volunteers such as myself so they can still have some form of virtual social interactions. However, not every senior living facility has provided their residents with alternative activities and ways to keep their spirits lifted. Therefore, I believe that during the COVID-19 pandemic, seniors in care facilities are experiencing a decrease in their quality of life due to the lack of social interaction. For the experimental design, 2 senior living facilities would be analyzed. One facility that hasn't tried to necessarily adapt to providing their residents with activities safe during the pandemic, and a second facility that has actively tried to support their residents by providing new activities to improve overall morale during times of the quarantine like Sunrise has. A pre and post survey at the beginning of the experiment and 2 months afterwards would be completed by the residents to both facilities. Also, to demonstrate efficacy of a facility providing activities for their residents, I tallied every time I made my resident laugh during our conversations. The mission of Sunrise Senior Living, like previously stated, is to provide good quality of life for their seniors. This also correlates with their core values of passion, joy in service, stewardship, respect, and trust. Whether they are true to their mission and all their staff hold these with high standards cannot be necessarily absolute. The mission does address a common concern or stereotype that is believed about senior living facilities by many people, which is it's commonly thought that these facilities are apathetic and withhold quality care to their residents. And personally, I have heard of friends' grandparents getting terrible treatment at some places. Although I do think Sunrise does indeed provide better opportunities for their residents compared to other places. Like I remember when I was part of Girl Scouts when I was a brownie, we used to volunteer at Sunrise a lot. And just recently looking at their website about how they've adapted to providing COVID-19 safe activities, I think they are upholding their mission statement well. One of the things they have considered was how they can still help improve or maintain cognitive function of those with and without neurological diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Some of the activities they have introduced since the COVID-19 pandemic include a new program called Sweet Stop, which is when they bring individualized engagement kits with items like colored pencils, adult coloring books, puzzles, and word searches based on that individual's hobbies and likes. Music therapy is another step they've taken and even stated what a great addition has been, especially to those with dementia. And then an alternative they came up to gardening was to let the residents who wanted to garden in the courtyard do so just one at a time, or the residents had the opportunity to have their own windowsill garden, which I know my resident did. She showed me on Instagram. So Sunrise's mission statement and values certainly connect with mine. They are quite similar to Fran Yu's core values as well, and they are certainly things I want to live by and provide my patients with in the future. I do have a special place in my heart for elderly people, and I have worked with them a lot as a physical therapy tech in orthopedics. I know that what they really generally need is just someone to talk to and to have to be listened to. For my service learning hours, I FaceTimed a resident every Wednesday, and it ranged from about 30 minutes to 2 hours, but I'll touch on the time later. I would sometimes jot down small details she said about her life so I wouldn't forget them in a conversation in the future. I also tallied the number of times I could make her laugh every session. When I picked this metric, I didn't realize what a great idea it was to choose, because I would always try to get more laughs than I had the last week. And it probably made the experience more enjoyable for the both of us than if I had picked a quote-unquote boring thing to measure. Additionally, it is known that laughter can have a great effect on someone's brain and their mental state throughout the day. My resident expressed to me how much it meant to her to be able to talk with each other every week, and so I hope other residents have experienced the same fulfillment. I believe the problem in many senior living facilities right now is the lack of socialization and safe activities for residents during the pandemic. Socialization is extremely important in having a fulfilling life as a human, because we are social creatures and that just doesn't go away as you age. There is already a lack of socialization for some seniors before COVID-19. As a PT tech, I did hear this very often from patients. They would tell me, oh, all my friends have passed away, or my kids are all grown up now. They don't talk to me that much anymore. And I could absolutely understand how they could start to feel forgotten or lonely, which is terrible. But this lack of socialization, it was even further exacerbated by COVID when it became a major threat to senior living facilities, because the residents were even further isolated by being quarantined to their own rooms for, my resident said, for months. Therefore, I wanted to address the differences between the residents of a facility that really hasn't adapted to providing safe activities and a place like Sunrise that has expanded its activities and socialization opportunities for their residents to still have a good quality of life. I also used the data of the number of times I made my resident laugh as a demonstration of the efficacy of socialization. If I were going to test this, I would want to collect data from 2 different senior homes. The home that did not adapt to provide their residents with many COVID-appropriate activities would be my control, and the home that tried to find new ways of increasing morale, safe activities, and new ways of socialization would be my experimental group. I would want to give a pre and post survey to both facilities and ask questions like the ones listed on this slide. It would be in the format of strongly agree, agree, neutral, strong, disagree, and strongly disagree. And I would have statements like, I feel like I have a purpose in life. I enjoy my everyday living here. I am rarely bored. Given the current pandemic, I am still able to be social with the people I care about, and the Residents can just say whether they agree with this statement or not. And the post-survey would be given after 2 months of increased adaptive COVID-safe activities for the experimental group. In order to demonstrate efficacy, I tallied every time I made my resident laugh. Obviously, if this was a real experiment, many forms of ethical considerations would be needed, including consent from the residents' family members, and the facility itself. And I just wanted to clarify that this experiment wouldn't make one place purposefully worse than the other. I think I would try to find one that is generally lacking, and the data I collect could perhaps give proof that some places should implement changes so their residents can be more fulfilled. To analyze the results, I would want to compare the experimental pre- and post-survey results and ideally look for an increase in fulfillment or happiness. I would also compare the results of the pre- and post-surveys from the control group and identify any changes, if there were any, or perhaps as time goes on, residents might become affected by the lack of socialization and stimulation. Then, to further analyze the data, I'd want to compare the post-surveys from both the groups and see if there was a significant difference, which I would like to see a difference, and hopefully use this information to encourage senior living facilities to provide more safe activities for their residents. And so for this graph, it shows the number of times I could make my resident laugh each day that we FaceTimed. Unfortunately, they aren't necessarily accurate to compare to each other because my FaceTime calls were not consistent. Sometimes the Sunrise employee in charge of the program would forget that my resident had the iPad and we would talk for 2 or more hours, and sometimes they would come back in exactly 30 minutes because another resident needed the iPad. So I can't necessarily state any kind of trend because that was out of my control, but this data just shows that I made her laugh as much as I could during whatever time span we had that day. Because Sunrise created this opportunity, she was able to laugh this many more times than she would have without it, which is significant. It doesn't take much to really make an elderly person's day, as much as you would think, I guess. But along with the funny moments, I provided my attention to listen to her and to ask her about her life, and I think this is a super important thing for seniors with or without the pandemic. So one limitation included having inconsistent sessions, which affects the conclusions that could be drawn from the graph, like if she felt an overall sense of happiness over time, so she laughed more. I can't really make that statement. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go. Another limitation is maybe finding 2 different senior care facilities in the same town that provide drastically different service to their residents. If the one with less activities for their residents would even want to participate in a study that could make them potentially look bad to the families of residents, they could lose business, essentially. But I really valued this experience. It's great that Fran U requires service learning hours because it adds experience and knowledge that we just aren't able to learn from a textbook.